Hi everyone, I'm continuing my research into King Arthur, and today I'm really pleased to welcome a very knowledgeable man indeed, Charles Evans-Gunther. Shwmae Charles, a chroeso.
Shmai, no star.
Thanks for joining me today. I'd like to explore the origin of the Arthur story and to hear your views on Arthur and his supposed battles. Now, Charles, I first became aware of you a couple of years ago from your insightful Facebook posts. I found these really helpful in learning about the subject, and I'm sure that many others feel the same. You're obviously someone who spent many years researching the topic, so can you tell me how you first became interested in this and tell me a bit about your studies on Arthur?
Okay, it started when I was a teenager. I, I, I never had any money. We never. The family was not very well off, so we didn't. I never had any money to buy books and things like that. So I spent a lot of time in the library. And one book I came across was this. Unfortunately, you can't see it very well. The Mabinogion, by translated sort of by Charlotte Guest. It's an everyman. And I managed years later to find my own copy, but in this kind of condition. And I'd never heard of the Mabinogion, never read anything about it. And then I read Culhwch Olwyn, and that changed my whole attitude. All I'd seen about Arthur was some television programs like Lancelot, excuse me, and that was pretty awful. With Merlin with a pointy hat and things like that, and King Arthur, who seemed not very interesting at all. So that was the first thing that started me off. Then the second one was this book, another book. Again, the cover's not very good. From Caesar to Arthur by Geoffrey Ashe. I don't even see that very well.
Yeah, just about.
And that started me being interested in Arthur. These two books, literally, there weren't much else in the library about King Arthur. Odd few others, which I eventually found. But then life took over, finding work, going to college, you know, becoming a teacher, this kind of thing. And then I didn't stay a teacher very long. I moved from being a teacher to after a year. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. Retired, and so I got a job in the library headquarters in Mold, Flintshire, as a cataloguer. It was a temporary job, but while I was there, I went into, I don't know if you know the term, stacks. Stacks are where they keep all the books, and they have the shelves that move. You turn a thing like this and it moves, and there were loads of them. And we had to go into the stacks to find these particular journals and to catalogue. And I went to the far wall, and on the far wall, gathering dust, and some of them just, almost piled up on the floor, was a collection of Arthurian books belonging to the man who set up the library system in Flintshire, a guy called Edward Harries, Ned Harries, and he was from Cardiganshire, but he came to live in Flint after the First World War, and he collected loads and loads of books. And when he died, he just left all these books to Flintshire County Council headquarters. Eventually, these were made into a special room. I'm not going to take any credit, but I did plague them a lot about doing something with this collection. And eventually the collection was increased to 5,000 books. And then one day I was in Chester, and I was in Smith's in Chester. I found this. This was on sale in Chester. Can you see that? Military modelling.
Yeah.
Arthur, fact or fiction, in over 3 months. And I wrote to them, because I was interested in Arthur. And for some some strange reason, they thought that I wanted to do more. And they put an advert in the in a magazine indicating I wanted to meet other people who were interested in Arthur. And quite soon, I got loads of letters from people, and so I set up a club and started producing a magazine. And this is the these are a few copies of the magazine that we created, called Dragon. There's a few of them like that. There's another one and another. It went on for 10 years, from 1982 to 1992, when it kind of, the interest in Arthur started to go downhill. And so I couldn't fill the journal with articles. I couldn't write them all myself. And I ended up almost doing that, writing them myself. So I gave up. And then quite soon after, another magazine which already existed, which I didn't know about, but found out over the years, is Pendragon. This is Pendragon. And I became editor of Pendragon, that one actually, and I edited three issues of Pendragon, which Pendragon continued to go on for years, but for me, it was too general. King Arthur, Round Table, theatre, this kind of thing. I wasn't really interested in things like that. And then I got a job working abroad, and so the whole Arthurian thing sort of went downhill somewhat for me, because I had to I'm teaching now, I'm teaching abroad, and I had to concentrate on that. But I never forgot. So luckily, the internet had just come in, or was building up at that time. And I eventually came across something called ArthurNet, with Judy Showorth, who's actually a member of the Arthur Facebook. You'll see her name coming up occasionally. And she kept this going for a long time. And so that was my, what would you say, what's the word? Cold turkey. I needed something. And I kept that. And also I continued, I brought books with me to Japan, where I was working, including Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, and sent articles back to Pendragon for 10 years. And so that's how it all started. It's over a period of time. And then when I come back from Japan, I'm now retired, and there's the internet and there's Facebook, and that's me really. And I'm now working on a book, maybe, if it'll ever get finished. I'm 77, so I don't know whether it will ever get finished. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that it does, because I'm looking forward to reading. I'm sure many others are too.
I don't know about that.
All right, Charles. Well, thanks for that.
That's the introduction.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so let's get into it then.
Okay.
So Arthur supposedly lived at a very turbulent time in British history. But what do we really know of the historical Arthur and the time in which he lived?
Right. That's my brother's just going to walk past. Okay.
Hello.
He's saying hello, Derek. Oh. He can't hear you because I'm on headphones. So. That's a big question, isn't it? It's a question.
It's right to the heart, the subject, I suppose.
Right to the heart. Well, yeah, the knife in the heart, really. Nothing. There's virtually nothing. There's nothing. You've got all you really got. And is it history? We're not even sure. First thing people talk about is a Gododin. But there's only this one little book in Cardiff Library, or used to be in Cardiff Library. I was in college in Newport, and I actually went to Cardiff Library to do research on prints. I had no idea that the Gododdin was there. I wish I knew it was there. It's now in the National Library of Wales, and you can see it on their website. But it's late, and the language is not really 6th century.
I suppose that some try to take it back to there, but I've never been convinced with those arguments. I think it's, well, I think some of it, at least, may be the product of the ninth or 10th century.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
about the
but it
limit.
tells you nothing. It tells you nothing. Just that he was a warrior that could be compared to. And
Uh,
unfortunately, this is what goes on through most of the Welsh tradition.
do you see the mention in the Gododdin as a mention of the Arthur or maybe a different Arthur?
Well, what can we say? It's Arthur, and that's all we know. It's the name. The name is Arthur. It's nothing else. It's Arthur. Um, but it's also rhyming with some other guy's name, Gwawdir. Now, the last UR is rhyming with Gwawdir. So who knows whether they picked the name to suit Gwawdir or the other way around. It's a difficult one, and because it doesn't tell you anything, I don't bother with it. So the first time Arthur appears, now some people won't agree with this, is the Historia Britonum, history of the Britons, and that famous collection of battles that you're interested in. But that doesn't tell you a lot. It just called, it just the phrase is dux erit bellorum. That means he was a leader in battle or a leader in war. He doesn't tell you much about him, doesn't tell you where he lived, doesn't even tell you when he lived. We're just dependent, but utterly dependent on the beginning of that part of the Historia Britonum and the latter part of it, where you have at the beginning the death of Hengist, and how Octha is, according to the Historia Britonum, not necessarily according to Saxon chronicles and things like that, might be a little different. But that's the only one. And the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says that he died in 488. And then the next, that's part of the sandwich. The other part of the sandwich, the lower part of the sandwich, or the later part of the sandwich, is the rise of Bernicia, and that's given to Ida, yeah, and that's found in Bede's works, and he puts it down as 547. So that's one of the things that you, if it's really history, you have to fit Arthur between death of Hengist, rise of Ida. Now, whether it's history, that's another thing, another kettle of fish, isn't it, really? My opinion about this is that it is and it isn't at the same time. Arthur, in my opinion, was a real person, but he didn't necessarily do what it says in the Historia Britonum. Because we
So
can't.
you would go as far as to not even attribute those 12 battles to Arthur?
I don't attribute them. A lot of people are going to disagree with that. I don't agree with it. I think that the HB was actually created specifically at a time when the Welsh, and that's what Gwynedd was, Powys at that time was already being defeated by Mercia, who are become belligerent towards their neighbours, and they were moving inwards. What the writer of the HB didn't know is that quite soon afterwards, things were going to go downhill in Mercia, and then Wessex was going to become the more powerful of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. But he wouldn't have known that, and the fear that these people must have had, because they'd already been attacking them, they'd come right across North Wales and were into Carnarvonshire. Though not staying there, they were raiding them and then going back. But this is a fear that must have been very strong for them. And also, at the same time, there was a new leader in Gwynedd, and he'd come possibly from the Isle of Man. And maybe this is Mervyn Vrich, his powerhouse might have been not very strong. And so whoever created the Historia Brittonum was either in fear of what's going to happen from the east, as well as worrying about the political situation in Gwynedd at that time.
So we could call it propaganda, maybe.
I call it propaganda. Yeah. You forced that one out of me. Yeah, propaganda. Yeah.
In terms of the 12 battles,
not necessarily lying, but propaganda. As all propaganda, often propaganda is not lying. It is taking facts and twisting them.
Yeah. So on the 12 battles, where do you think they came from then? Can we attribute them to someone else maybe, or?
Possibly one can be attributed to someone else. One of them is the problem. It's one of the just before Baden. Baden has always been attributed to Arthur because of the next thing that he appears in, which is the Annales Cambriae. And then it became Arthur fighting at Baden was much more popular, especially after Geoffrey of Monmouth got around and created this new Norman-style King Arthur. But he had to fight at Baden, and therefore Baden became part of the Arthurian genre and continued to be talked about. But only one of them looks like it could have been, but it's not in all the versions of it. That's the problem. There are a number of versions of the Historia Brittonum, and the one we normally use is the Harleian manuscript, which is the most complete one. But there are others, and others don't show the same thing. They have slightly different names for the battles, and also a particularly different name for this one, which was Agned.
I see.
Agned, yeah. And now Agned is in the Harleian manuscript, it's just Agned. But others will, can show you, like Kenneth Jackson or Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews, who's written a very interesting. This is the Bible for the battles. This is Kenneth Jackson's. Once again, Arthur's battles. It's very old now. And the photocopy from the modern philology, 1945. How many years ago is that? That's a long time. 80 years ago. He changed some of it. He added to it later on, and some of it was in the Arthurian literature in the Middle Ages, where he wrote the first two chapters, and he changed some of his ideas about this, but not much. And some years ago, Keith produced this long article, which you can download at any time, and it's actually in the files of Facebook King Arthur. Yeah, they go into it in detail, but if you read them carefully, you'll see that it's guesswork. There's nothing to back any of them up. None of them really. Chester, for instance, it could be Chester. The city of legions, or the city of Legion. Arthur fights that one, but it's it's so far away from the from Saxons from that it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But there was later on a battle at Chester, but that doesn't say that couldn't have been another battle at Chester before, and certainly two afterwards. There was certainly one in during the Civil War where they fought a battle and besieged Chester. Men from Flint, my town, actually fought there. You know, because we were fighting in our own castle in our town. You know, we were besieged here. Well, so there's not much to go on, and it's actually mainly guessing and guessing based on the names of the places. And unfortunately, apart from Chester, none of them can be really tracked down with any certainty.
I know in the Welsh tradition as well, well, in some later Welsh poetry, the Gorgonfeirdd maybe, are some
Hmm.
of Arthur's battles mentioned there, maybe different to the Historia Brittonum. Carvenchi, maybe?
Sorry?
Carvenchi?
I had a vent for you.
I think it comes up in some poetry. Yeah, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on the authenticity of some of Arthur's battles mentioned there, maybe. But
As far as I know, and that's the first time I've heard that one, but I mean, there's a lot of poetry floating around. Most of it is not written down at the same time, not written down in the 12th and 13th century. A lot of it wasn't written down until the 14th and 15th century. Um, I, I've come across 25 references to Arthur in the Gorgonfeirdd, maybe 28. But I don't remember any of them mention any specific battles. There is that. What there is, I think I understand what you're saying. There is one where talks about the patron being like Arthur at Caerfenllyn.
so that's how you read it. I think it's by Bleddyn Vardd, wasn't it?
I think it's by Blairlin Valor. Yes, it is. Yes, it is by Blairlin Valor.
Yeah, so you see it as the patron then
I
at
think
that
it's
site.
the patron. It's being compared to Arthur.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Not as far as I know, there was never a battle. I know the place. It's over there, not far
Yeah,
away.
I thought you might. Yeah.
I've not actually been up on the Clwydians, but it's there. And there's also a Moilath there, up there as well.
Yes,
But
I
it's a hill
suppose
fort, a genuine
Arthur's
hill fort.
attributed with a few mountains, isn't he?
A
Throughout
couple of
Britain,
mountains.
really.
Yeah, yeah. All right, yeah, throughout Britain. And one went on fire near Edinburgh quite recently. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, there's a couple of my neck of woods
yeah,
as well.
yeah. So, yeah.
Um, yeah, so another Arthurian battle is Camlann, because that's mentioned in the Annals Cambriae and
That's
associated.
in the Annales Cambriae, but it's not in the Historia Brittonum. Yeah. Now that makes you wonder. After that, you start to get Camlann being the only battle that seems to be attributed to Arthur. It appears, and it keeps coming. And it's in poetry, it's in prose, it's in the triads. There's more of that than anything. Baden, forget it. It's not even. It's hardly mentioned in the Welsh tradition at all. Um, it's mentioned in a number of poems by Cyndelw. Cyndelw mentions it, but not in the same breath as Arthur. He's not saying Arthur fought this battle. He just said Baden was a really big battle that is worth remembering, and it fought the nasty Saxons who were. But it doesn't say that Arthur fought it. It's there, and I think there are about eight mentions of Baden, but never in the same line or in the same stanza with Arthur.
Okay, so
But
supposedly,
Camlann is a different kettle of fish.
yes, so in terms of Badens, that was supposedly a great victory for the Britons over the Saxons, do you think? Or
Now, this is a very difficult one, isn't it? Because all we've got to go on is Gildas de Excidio Britanniae, yeah. And what he says about Baden is that it was a siege of some kind, obsessio, Adonicus Montes. It's a siege of a mountain or a hill called connected to a place called Baden. He doesn't say it's a great victory. If you read Gildas right from at the beginning, Gildas sort of does an sort of what's the right word to use? Abstract. He does an abstract of what he's going to write about, and he does talk about a great victory, but in the abstract it doesn't mention Baden. Now, when he gets to Baden, they're fighting the Saxons as far as we can understand, fighting the Saxons, and they've been fighting them for some time, and they've been winning and losing, swings and roundabouts. At some point, something changes, and at Baden, a change took place. After that, the Britons are winning, and for some reason, after a period of time, and how many battles after Baden, I don't know, the Saxons, or whether they were Saxons or whatever they were, decided they were going to stop fighting. And Gildas says there were no more external wars except for civil wars. And so that's fighting each other. The Britons are fighting each other, not the Saxons over on the east. So Baden is become important, in my opinion, because of Bede. Bede leaves out some sentences. He leaves out some phrases in that area where it seems to give the indication that this is the mother of all battles. But Gildas didn't say that. It wasn't the last and it wasn't the least, he says, which means that there might have been even bigger battles, and there probably were more. It was a battle where the balance of power changed. So now the Britons are on a winning streak, and the Saxons give up for a period of time. Maybe they made a treaty, we don't know. And then some years later, things changed altogether. And it wasn't for a while. I mean, it wasn't until the 550s that the Anglo-Saxons started to really get their act together again. And if you read the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, the Saxons hardly moved away from the coast until the 550s. They just stayed there. Most of the battles were in areas around the south coast of England. Then
Maybe say that they raided the whole island, though, Charles. I think Gildas
that's
suggests
possible, isn't it? Yes.
suggests something to that extent, doesn't he?
Yes, but everybody will tell you, and anybody who knows anything about Gildas, is that we don't know where he lived, we don't know where he was writing from, and the only evidence we've got is that his geography was not very good. We got these 5 tyrants, and seemingly the 5 tyrants were all on the western side of Britain. But only names 2 places, and and even if the first one is not quite sure, Damnonia. Now he could be playing with a word. There's no such place as Damnonia. Dumnonia, Duvan in Welsh. Dumnonia is possibly Damnonia, as he's talking about. If you read Gildas, he plays with words all the time. The other one is Dementia, land of the Dyfed, basically, the southwest Wales.
Yeah.
And so you've got those are the only 2, and then
Do we
sorry,
attribute
one more, three, possibly 3 is Maglacunas, who could be Maelgwn Gwynedd. So you've got north, you've got you've got Cornwall area, Cornwall, Devon area. You've got southeast Wales, southwest Wales, and you've got northwest Wales.
Yeah.
That's showing you that the only people he really knew were on the western side of Britain. He probably didn't know anybody else. He'd never been anywhere. And we don't even know where he's writing from. He could have been writing from Glastonbury. And
Okay.
so, if he's in Glastonbury, he's probably that's reasonably near the range of raiding for the Saxons in the south. And that's what might have affected his attitude towards what was taking place. I don't
His
think.
later hagiography, does that place him in southeast Wales? Um, Llancarvan maybe, or Llanilltid maybe?
Um,
Is that
he
possible?
seems he seems if you read all these, and if you as you know, most of them are quite late. These lives of the saints. Gildas was educated possibly by someone in southeast Wales. Saint Illtyd, maybe. There was some kind. Strangely enough, that area seems very religious, and a survival of Christianity in that little area around, Caerwent, etc. And but often you hear Irish names. Irish names are coming. Why are they coming all the way from Ireland to southeast Wales? Tathan, is it Tathan? I think Tathan was one of the first um, saints mentioned at Caerwent. And it's possible that when the Romans decided to give up and go home, sort of, um, Caerwent had some kind of religious survival. And then it moved out. So it's possible that Gildas was actually educated in that part of Britain, which is no great distance from Glastonbury, as you know. In fact, when I was in Newport, I used to go to theatre in Bristol. So, you can get there quite quickly. And I'm sure you could get there quite quickly in the 6th century. What you can't get to is other parts of Britain. If you've got no roads worth travelling on, and no trains, no cars, nothing like that. So life was a bit difficult back then. As
Yeah.
as a
No, I
Please,
suppose
sorry.
the impression that I get from that time is maybe from some of the saints' lives, there seemed to be saints traveling from maybe central and southeast Wales. And they went to Ireland and they went to Dumnonia and they went to Brittany as well.
Brittany, yes, yes,
So I
yeah.
think people maybe use the sea to travel quite freely between those areas.
Yes, but we don't know how long it took them to get from one place to another. It's not the kind of instant travel that we're used to. And even in the Middle Ages, traveling any distance was something you took on. And they talked about it in the Middle Ages. You're going to from say North Wales to St David's. How long would it take you to walk from? And people have done it. Of course, people have done it, and there are still pilgrims today who walk these. Not they don't go by train, they don't go by car, they walk. It takes ages. Getting to Brittany, you'd have to go by boat, wouldn't you? Now, one wonders, what the Saxons doing while you're going across the British Channel, the English Channel to Brittany. Are they just sitting there, just ignoring you? Yeah, I don't know. It's not that easy, is it? It's not as clear cut. What
Well,
we
no,
know of that
especially when
period
you're
is,
being raided the whole time as well.
yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah. We don't know a lot about the period. A lot of it is we're getting to know some of it by archaeology and by DNA, etc., by genetics. But the nitty gritty of life in that period,
Yeah.
we
I
don't know.
suppose the general impression that we get from Gildas, I don't know how much you would agree from this, is maybe his recollections on more distant history aren't that accurate, but near his own time, it gets a bit better, perhaps. And
I
the
agree. I
Britons,
agree. Yeah.
Well,
I
I was gonna say,
agree.
the Britons seem to employ Saxon federates that they settled in the southeast,
Yeah,
like you said.
yeah, yes, yeah.
They then rebelled and called for reinforcements from back home and raided across Britain. And then the
Hmm.
survivors banded together under the leadership of Ambrosius Aurelianus, and then had some success at least in resisting the enemy. Is that how you see it from maybe our only near contemporary source?
I guess that's all we can say, really. Um, I think how many Fiodorate were there? You know, how many parts of Britain were using Saxons or people from other parts of Western Europe? It doesn't say that there was just one group who came and that was it. It's likely, and experts on the subject of late Roman period have shown that there are a lot of German, Germanic people coming to Britain because they're being paid to be part of the Roman army. And the Roman army, at the end of its stay in Britain, was not what you see on movies. A completely different kind of system, changed altogether. And they were not only being dependent on foreign troops, they were actually, their leaders were foreigners. Many, including emperors. Some of the emperors they weren't Romans, they were from different parts of the empire, and the empire was bringing in these warriors because they needed warriors. And Gildas seems to indicate that the Britons had forgotten how to fight. So what do they do? What do? You look somewhere for somebody to defend your farm or your town. Towns are the cities in that period would have been very difficult to defend. So they then employ someone who is capable of defending, a warrior class. Now, could they have got people from Ireland to work in mainland Britain fighting for them? Because they had never been invaded by the Romans. They were still a warrior class. They were an heroic society. The Picts in the north, there may have been Picts even closer. They were also heroic societies, as were the Saxons and the Jutes and the Angles. They're used to fighting, so it's a good idea. You use somebody who can defend your property against possibly other Britons.
Yeah, it reminds me actually of something I think it was Thomas Charles Edwards said,
Hmm.
um, that maybe when Gildas talked of the Saxons, he was talking more perhaps of Picts or Gaels, and perhaps he wasn't quite being specific about Germanic peoples.
But he does actually at one point use the word Saxons. And I think then he uses this famous term, those who should not be named.
Ah,
Again, don't repeat it. Don't repeat the name. Don't say Saxons again. It's a bit like Maggie Thatcher, or Darth Vader. Don't say it, this kind of thing. Don't
uh,
mention Saxons again. But I think he actually means Saxons, or at least he means Germanic peoples who
yeah, I
are
think he names
generic
them,
term.
but what did he mean by it, I suppose? Could he have a wider meaning than maybe we think
I
of
don't.
today?
We'll never
Um,
know that. We'll never know
yeah,
that.
okay. Yeah, so we've briefly talked about Camlann, and I've done some videos about Camlann. I know you've written about it a lot recently. Um, what can we say about the battle and where it was fought? Can we speculate on a location, maybe?
No, I wouldn't go that far. Um, we know nothing of the battle. It's just the Annales Cambriae says, you know, Gwaith, Camlann, and Arthur and Mordred fell. That was it. That's the lot. That's all. If that's history, that's all we got. We don't even know whether Arthur and Medraut were actually opponents or allies. They may have been fighting together when they died. back to back, and in one novel by Helen Hollick, she actually uses that instead of having Mordred being this nasty nephew of King Arthur. She imagines him as being something else, and in the end, they are fighting together in the last battle. But most people don't. It's because of Geoffrey of Monmouth. He has had such a great influence over what everybody thinks about Arthur. And so poor Mordred, Medrawd, is the villain of the part, isn't he? And yet in the poetry, Welsh poetry, that doesn't seem to appear. My impression is that Camlann, if you believe the triads, was some kind of family feud, clan feud, whatever you want to call it, something like that, rather than some great loss of a traitor trying to take over the whole of Britain. It's just two families fighting each other, and that's why the triads call it a futile battle. And some of the other futile battles are even worse. This is the triads say something like it started over Gwenhwyfach slapping Gwenhwyfar. It's a slap. And in another one, it has we get the bit where Medrawd sort of raids Arthur's court and pulls Gwenhwyfar off the throne or something like that, off a chair, and slaps her. Now, Rachel Bromwich decided or suggested that that might have been some kind of mix-up there. My other thing is that I think Medrawd is possibly innocent. And if you look at the prose stories and some of the poetry, there's another character called Melwas, who abducted Gwenhwyfar and took her to Glastonbury, Glastonbury, yeah. And it may be Melwas who is the baddie of the piece, but Geoffrey Monmouth, what did he do? Melwas is not the most violent of names, Honey Prince, a honey prince, yeah, Melwas. But it gets even worse if you add another R onto Medrawd and become Modred becomes Mordred. It becomes really, he sounds like a really nasty character, doesn't he?
Sinister,
Mordred.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I think I may be completely wrong, probably am, that Medrawd has been, what's the word? He wasn't as bad as he seems. And what happened had some kind of effect on someone to say, I'm going to remember this. This battle which made us lose Arthur and Medrawd at the same time. But he still doesn't tell us why or where. We're stuck, aren't we? We're really stuck. We don't have much to go on. The rest of it all comes much later and is mixed up with folklore and such, and then influenced by Geoffrey of Monmouth. And after that, what do you do?
Yeah, I suppose I agreed with Patrick Sims Williams when he suggested maybe a location near Dinas Mawddwy, based on one of the Englynion that named Camlann. It's not clear, I do admit that, but I think there's a tradition there as well. I don't know if you want to say a bit about that.
I don't know of any tradition in that area. Not before 1893, anyway. So
I think
that's a
Sims
problem.
Williams, he's traced it back to before 1765 because he noted that Lewis Morris noted Dinas Mawddwy next to his copy of the Englynion, which was in an older manuscript. So it doesn't go really far back, but I think maybe the
It doesn't
Englyn,
go follow it back. That's the problem. And
Okay.
if you look at if you look at the Melville Richards collection of basically card index, but you can actually look it up on the internet. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact title. The
Is it
Melville
Melville Richards
Richard
Archive, I think?
Archives. That's right. I've spoken to people who knew him, and he was quite a character. He had in it literally pieces of card. He had a room full of this card index. And when he died, Professor Bedwyr Lewis Jones took over his position at Bangor University. But he died. He also died quite young, and it's taken years and years before all these records can actually be seen. But now that they've got that Bangor University managed to get it all onto the internet, it's when you look at that, it's difficult to find Camlann before the 16th century.
It's a great resource, isn't it, actually, the Melville
It's an
Richards
excellent
Archive?
resource.
Very useful.
Not completely. What's the word? There are mistakes.
Right.
There's always going to be mistakes. You can't. Nothing is perfect, and there's going to be something missing somewhere.
Well, I know
But
you
there's a
watched my video with Paul Smith, and I recommended a book by Scott Lloyd. And I think you know Scott Lloyd, and that's a great
yes,
book,
yeah, yes, yeah, yeah.
Arthurian Place Names of Wales. So that's useful as well.
Yeah, I know. I met Scott Lloyd back years ago, but I met him through Steve Blake. Well, Steve Blake worked with me when I worked at the Clued Education Department.
Really good. They've written some great books, actually. I'm a
No,
big
they
fan.
haven't. No, they haven't.
Haven't they? Okay.
And both Steve and Scott now would tell you that they made mistakes, and Steve moved away from it, but Scott decided that he was going to try and make up for these mistakes. Then he went back. He may have finished it by now, a PhD on popular Arthur, yeah? The popular Arthur. And he's interviewed lots of authors. I don't think he ever got to, he interviewed me as well. He invented lots of the popular Arthur authors, like Graham Phillips, etc., etc.,
Yeah.
etc. And so for many, he worked very hard after the failure of Avalon, the Keys of Avalon, which was how can I be fair? I mean, I remember I came home on holiday and I spoke to Steve and he said, look, here's the proofs of the book. Have a look at it. I nearly had a heart attack. It was so bad. And I said, look, Steve, do you really want to get this printed? He says, it's too late. We can't do anything about it. It's already in the process. And from that, Steve Blake and Scott Lloyd got a lot of flack indeed. And so Scott then decided, they both decided to write a different book, the Pendragon one, which was that bit better, but still, not quite.
Okay. I've read one called The Lost Legend of Arthur, and I found it quite useful.
Yeah, that's just Pendragon in a different
Is it?
form.
All right,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a
So that's a
paperback
better
form,
one
yeah.
then than the Keys of Avalon, you would say.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. It's better, but it's still not. Yeah, they didn't go far enough, and they
But
did actually fall back onto Keys of Avalon in some parts of it.
what books have influenced you then? What would you recommend?
Too many. There are too many. Look behind me.
Good
There's
collection.
no. There's a. Not all of them are Arthurian, but there are six shelves of Arthurian stuff there. And upstairs in my bedroom, about 300 more of them.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, God, I've been collecting books on Arthur since when I was a teenager, basically. So you're talking what, 50 years?
I see.
But in that time, of course, you've got to work. Things change. I worked as a graphic designer for 20 years. and then became made redundant, and then went to work in Japan for another 10 years. So I never had the chance to really sort of sit down, work on it, and try and say something. And over the last, since the 2008, I was interrupted on the Arthurian thing because in 2015 would be the 100th anniversary of the Gallipoli landings in Turkey during the First World War. And many men from my town were on that landing, and nobody was doing anything. So I had found out that the three of my great uncles were actually at Gallipoli. And so I decided to write a book on that subject, and that took up several years of my life. And then I published that in 2015. So
So tell
Arthur,
us
at
the
the big
name of
question
that
side,
book, Charles. What was the
it's,
name of that?
it's called The Fight in Fifth,
Oh, okay.
the 5th Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers. They were the local regiment, yeah?
Yeah.
And they were with the 6th Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers and the 7th Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers. And they were sent not to fight the Germans, but to fight the Turks at Suvla Bay, where they got a second day. They were beaten, cut to ribbons by a handful of Turkish militia. 42,000 Allied troops landed in Gallipoli, and at one point of those 40, the enemy consisted of 1,000 soldiers with 19th century rifles,
Why me?
led by a very clever German called Major Wilmer. He had a nice scar down one side, and he had his head screwed on and managed to keep the British troops so that they didn't take the area. And in that time, he held back the British troops. The Turks were able to send professional soldiers from northern Turkey to fight at the Gallipoli. That was it. Gallipoli lasted for the rest of the year in trenches, basically. What are Churchill's follies? So
Yes.
a good idea originally, but it didn't work. So part of my time after I came back from working abroad was taken up by continuing my research, what I'd already done in the past on that. And so the Arthurian thing sort of got pushed to one side.
Yeah.
Apart from other things, I mean, in 1992 I became part of a reenactment group.
All right.
Still got long hair and beard, you see.
Oh, yeah. Well, what do you reenact, Charles?
Well, originally, back in 1992, we were a Welsh war band fighting the English.
Aha, there we are.
I was
Noble cause.
an archer,
Oh, really?
and doctor.
Oh, that
And
sounds very fun.
oh, it was great fun. Yeah, we had how many years? Up to 1998, we went around beating up the English. Not really, of course. And we'd always, it was a joke that because most of the people who came to see us were actually English, so we'd lay into them,
Yeah.
So that was
Sure they
good. And
appreciate
then, then I got a job abroad. Reenactment was weekend things. I went abroad, and when I came back, I rejoined the reenactment group, but by then they changed. Now we were no longer, the group was no longer late 13th century, and they'd moved into the 14th century, nearer the 15th century because of Owain Glyndŵr.
I see.
And so, and also they had a doctor. They had a new doctor, so I couldn't be a doctor anymore. And I getting a bit old. I was getting a bit old for loosing arrows. Difficult, You're pulling it.
Yeah.
100 pound, 80 pound bow is quite difficult to pull.
Yeah.
So I changed my whole tack, and I became a calligrapher. I became a scribe, and so since 2008, I've been studying manuscripts as well. So again, those kind of things, studying the period, the medieval period, 14th century into the 15th century, as well as studying calligraphy, not in college or anything, but on my own bat, uh, pushed Arthur to one side somewhat. Always there, always in the back of the mind, always bubbling over. But now
Does the
everything's
calligraphy
changed.
aspect of it help you give you an insight at least into maybe scribal errors and that type of thing? Because sometimes
Very true.
people do suggest emendations to texts and that sort of thing because of errors. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
The Welsh, specifically Welsh texts, are difficult. It's not that they can't be read. It's because, but that not that the handwriting is bad. It's because they use some odd letters, very strange letters
yeah.
in places, and sometimes it can be a bit confusing.
I suppose the Latin alphabet's not really suited to the Welsh language, maybe. Anyway, Charles, I won't keep you for too much longer, but a couple more questions. How far? Well, some have suggested that a Roman soldier was Arthur, Lucius Artorius Castus. Is this something that you agree with? Is this possible, maybe?
No, no, no. I don't agree with that completely. I've got, if you look behind, you can see a few books on that subject. Tony Sullivan's Malcor and Matthew's book is behind me. I remember reading when I was still in the education department. It was Clwyd back in those days. Clwyd, not Flintshire or Denbighshire. It's now back to Denbighshire and Flintshire.
I remember Clwyd.
You remember Clwyd?
Yeah.
So I was in the Clwyd education department at that time, and but I also did other things like researching because I'd worked in the library. They would send me down to do research. I did a couple of Eisteddfods. I worked on the real Eisteddfod. I also worked on the international Eisteddfod every year at Llangollen. So I did research for them, for different Eisteddfods and subjects that they picked. And so the library knew me very well. And so the librarians would often say, I have found something on Arthur, this kind of thing. And they would show me. I remember being told by one librarian, there's this journal that mentions something about King Arthur being a Roman whatever, a Roman whatever he was, officer, let's say. So they gave me, they got a copy for me. So I read it back in the 1970s, I suppose. So long. I then I'm bad on names, so I'm trying to think who actually wrote it. Two people wrote the original
Was
idea.
it Paddle? OJ
Oh
Paddle?
no, 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 no!
Wasn't it? Was it?
Long before them, before him. Paddle is not all that, not from the 70s. I don't think he might have been in college at that time. I think. I can't remember his name, but it would mean me having to go across there and dig out and pick out a book and find out. I eventually lost. There were two articles on the subject. I eventually lost them during a move. I kept many of my articles, in this kind of state, photocopies. But during a move, some of my articles went astray, and it included these ones on Lucius Artorius Castus and the Sarmatians. This was the big thing. The Sarmatians were the big thing. But one of them can be read on the internet. And it was the idea that there was somebody called Artorius who gave the name to Arthur. Nothing against that. It's a name. It's just a name, and I think that's all it is. A name that was passed down. There were loads of Arturi all over Europe. There's no, just because one of them actually visited Britain doesn't say there weren't other members of that family, that gens, who lived in Britain, but we've got no records of them. I mean, how much we think we know a lot about the Roman period. We don't. It's not as well known as you think.
Can
And
I
there
just
must have
ask,
been.
can we go as far as to say that Lucius Sartorius Castus was definitely in Britain?
Yes, yes, yes. Um, the every indication he was a member of the sixth legion at Ambracum, yeah, at
But I
York.
suppose chronologically he would be wrong, wouldn't he? Because he's too early.
Well, when did Arthur live?
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yes, he was about what second or third century A.D.
Okay. Okay, that's great, Charles. The other thing, the
Can't go
Holy
into
Grail.
detail about him. Too much to say
Yeah,
on Lucius
that's okay.
Aratorius Castus.
The Holy Grail. What do you make of this object, and why was Arthur searching for it? And is there a connection with a Welsh relic, maybe the Nanteos Cup?
Dear me, I got an Antaeus upstairs. As a reenactor, we all had these wooden bows, and that's all the Nanteus cup is a bow, and it could have come from anywhere. And it has been said that it came from Palestine, but when some expert on wood looked at it, it was a British wood, not a Middle Eastern wood. But some people would disagree with that. Um, no, nothing to it at all. Arthur is brought into this Holy Grail thing as a sort of just like what we call it, a base to work on a story. And some people would disagree with me, but I don't believe there was ever a Holy Grail before Chrétien de Troyes wrote it, and that was in the end of the 12th century. And when you read it, one wonders whether the Holy Grail was of any importance whatsoever. What was it? What was Chrétien trying to say? The impression is that it's a story of two men, Percival and Gawain. Gawain is already a knight, but Percival is this man from the boondocks. He's a Welshman, and you can tell he's a Welshman because he's wearing trousers and he's not very intelligent. This is typical of the period. The Welsh were barbarians, the Bretons were barbarians, the Irish were barbarians, the Scots were barbarians. This was a kind of prejudice, but Chrétien needed a fool. He needed this character, Percival, to change from a fool to become a knight. Gawain is already a knight. And so there's a comparison between. Unfortunately, Chrétien never finished. But he gives indications in it that something else is going to happen near the end. But it might have nothing to do with the Holy Grail. Other titles for other stories by Chrétien have nothing to do with the title. The story, nothing to do with the title. It's just one event that appears in the story, and it giving a title. So the Holy Grail may have meant nothing too much, just something really, really nice piece of imagination by Chrétien, and people will look at this is entertainment. And in one of his story, he asks the reader or the person who's reading his story, are you being entertained? Does this entertain you? And I think the Holy Grail is not so important. It becomes important years and years later when they change this platter, which can hold big enough to hold a salmon. There's it's not a bowl. It's this kind of plate that you can put a salmon on. But it's holy because it doesn't contain a salmon. It contains a host, and the host is taken to some guy who's you never see in the story. I think Arthur is just brought into it because Arthur was very, very popular throughout the Franco-Norman world, all the way from Britain to the Middle East. and later even further away, getting further away, made into movies. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
don't think the Holy Grail has any connection whatsoever with Wales at all.
no problem at all. I suppose in Welsh tradition, Arthur also appears as a mythological figure in some early sources. Um, is it likely that Arthur began as a deity or something similar, and then mistakenly became historicized, as many who study the subject believe?
Yeah. I think that there are people who do say this. I just can't answer that question. It's a difficult question. You can't prove it one way or the other. There are no indications of anybody called Arthur before Arthur appeared in the Historia Brittonum. There are no gods who are called Arthur. There are no other, not in the Mabinogi. It doesn't appear in the Mabinogi. Taliesin appears in the Mabinogi, but Arthur doesn't. And none of the characters. All right, that's not fair. Some of the characters in Kilwch Olwen do appear in the Mabinogi, and but only not even a handful, one or two of them, and one character from Mabinogi appears in some of the poetry. I don't know. It's difficult. No, I would say no. Basically, I think maybe yeah, maybe legend has been superimposed on someone rather than the other way around. Arthur didn't do all the things that we think he did, and then somebody made him do that. Professor Bedwy Lewis Jones always said to me when I met him a few times, he, I met him for quite a long time. I sat in his office and we talked about it. He was very kind, and he said, "It's not who is Arthur, it's who's Arthur." Yeah, each person sees a different Arthur. So Geoffrey of Monmouth makes him into a king. Somebody writing about the saints in South Wales change Arthur into something else. And then he goes to France and he becomes a sort of French kind of king. In Geoffrey of Monmouth, he's the Norman kind of king. In Wales, he's something called a Penternid. The hell is that? It doesn't appear in any of the Welsh official titles in the Welsh laws. It is just
Usually
something.
translated as chief sovereign, isn't it? Pentavner.
Well, no, chief of princes or something like that, isn't it? The Terned is plural, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the development. This is who's Arthur, who's seeing Arthur. Yeah. That that each person is seeing a different Arthur, and that's why today you get people who see Arthur in other ways. So I am descended from Arthur, not me personally, but somebody might be. There's one person who believed they'd found the DNA of Arthur. Would you believe? How would they find his DNA? We don't know where the grave is. It's an anoith. It's an anoith.
Yeah.
No one knows where the grave is, but the Inglani and the Beddai it's a grave because the three before him say graves, but they don't know where Arthur's grave is, so they called it an anoith, which we're not quite sure how to translate.
It's a theme that goes way back, isn't it? The
It is.
lack of a grave for Arthur. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that at one point during my years and years of researching, I got the impression that there may be a grave, and it's quite a wonderful grave, and it could have been in Scotland. But I don't think it really means that. I think it's a mystery. I think the anoith means it's something impossible, something very difficult to do.
Yeah, there's a Kairoith and Anoith as well, isn't there? I
Yeah,
can't.
yeah,
One of the
yeah,
triads, maybe I can't
yeah.
remember.
That's right. Yeah, yes, you're right. Yeah,
Could it be part of the mythology of Arthur that he'd died in
Oh,
that
he was a
location.
prisoner,
Yeah,
a prisoner in Caer Wyth an Anoeth, ac Anoeth, Agonoeth.
there we are. It's a tantalizing one, isn't it, really?
A difficult one, isn't it?
Well, Charles, I
Um,
think, well, that's great. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today. I think it's a good place to leave it now. Thank you very much for joining me.
you're welcome. What
Um,
time is it? Only eight,
it's
only
gone, eh?
just gone
Well,
eight. Just
I
about to.
think there's a lot more that we could say.
There's a thousand
Maybe,
things we could say, isn't there? Really?
maybe you'll join me another time as well.
Yeah, it's okay.
Um, but yeah, it's been absolutely great. Thanks very much, Charles.
No, no, you're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Cheers.